الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala in the subject of al-fiqh and with nawaqid al-wudu. Nawaqid al-wudu, the things that breaks the wudu or the nullifiers of the wudu. The nullifiers of the wudu. What nullifies one's wudu. And we talked about the conditions and the obligations and the sunan and the makruhat. And this is always the subject or the different categories of things and matters of fiqh, to know the five ahkam, al-ahkam al-khamsa, what's wajib, what's haram, what's mustahab, recommended, what's makruh, disliked, and what's permissible. And the purpose of this, as we heard, as the ulama they mentioned, is not to leave the recommended because it's recommended versus the obligation, but rather to know if something that a person missed. This is the fiqh, is basically law, rules to be followed. So if someone missed something in the salah, did he miss an obligation that requires for the person a rukn, a pillar of the salah or a pillar of the wudu that nullifies the wudu completely, or it's something recommended that it doesn't harm the wudu. So this is the main purpose of this, not that a person would willingly leave something recommended when he's able to do it. And the other meanings and other principles that we heard, like the makruh, for example, disliked matters. If you leave it, you get rewards for it. And if you do it, there's no sin. But it doesn't mean for us to do the makruh. It means that if a person is in need, the makruh becomes not makruh, becomes jaiz, becomes permissible if there's a need, there's a haja. That's different than al-haram. Al-haram, something haram, does not become permissible if there's a need. It's only in a darura or necessity, life and death situation. So these types of principles of fiqh to understand, so that we're able to do things in the proper way according to the way the Prophet ﷺ, and to encourage us even to do more and more of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So nawaqid al-wudu. Nawaqid al-wudu, and we're being very brief. And the most important thing in that stage is to have the proper tasawwur, the proper perception of what the masail of the fiqh, this is the mas'ala, what it means. And as far as the ruling, just whatever that one ruling that is mentioned according to the book. If there is some differences of opinions, because this is what the fatwa or what's recommended by the contemporary scholars or so are upon, we just to know that, so that we is not something strange to many. But again, the point is not going through the adillah or the evidences, so that we can cover the entire book, inshallah ta'ala. And this is not being in haste, right? This is the proper way of studying fiqh, that we have to start studying it from the first, like the entry book of fiqh, if it's correct. You cover the entire chapters of fiqh in a brief way to understand every mas'ala. And all of that, what we're doing in English, is not really studying fiqh, we're just getting to know the masail. Then after that, the real studying is when we study it in Arabic only, so that we have the proper even tasawwur, when we perceive the masail in the right way from the language of al-ilm. And then we will get to know more the more we advance with the evidences of others and the differences of opinions and matters like this. That's why we are in need of those who dedicate themselves for the ilm, especially at the time that we live in. So don't take the matter of seeking knowledge lightly. It's not just some books that a person reads and finishes and that's it. Early generations of Islam, they spend their entire life learning the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's how they became what they are. For someone to have this level of rusukh, or well established in ilm, not just some readings here and there. So don't be in haste, inshallah. And at the same time, with al-ikhlas, with sincerity, the dedication, the determination that the person's life is dedicated to seek the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. طيب, nawaqid al-wudu. He says, nawaqid al-wudu sab'a. Nawaqid al-wudu sab'a. There are 7 things that nullifies or negates the wudu. And nawaqid is the plural of naqid. Naqid is one. And naqd al-shay is when something is fasad, or corrupted, or it's broken, or it's destroyed. It depends on how it's used. So nawaqid al-wudu, that means a person's wudu is not valid anymore. And we talked about the definition of al-wudu, that this is not just purification or cleanliness. This is a special way of of doing things according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, that changes the state of the person from being in state where he's not able to make salah, for example, then he's able to make salah. So to be in state of wudu, this is a condition for the salah to be accepted. So what negates it, that means a person has to make wudu to be in state of wudu, 7 things. Al-awwal, the first one, al-khariju min as-sabilayn. Al-kharij, what comes out from kharaja, min as-sabilayn, as we talked about that word before, from the 2 passages or the 2 paths, which is the proper or the etiquette in the Arabic language of using words that is not has the fuhsh in it or the explicit meanings of it. So al-khariju min as-sabilayn, what comes out from the normal passages of what impurities comes from the human being, which is the passage of the urine and the passage of the feces. And the nawaqid al-wudu or matters of fiqh, of course, there's no shyness in the religion, and these are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in us. And our body, we intake things and we excrete things. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and we were tested with regards to these things. And part of that is to purify ourselves from what's impure and what comes out, what breaks the wudu, what's impure that needs to be washed. All of that is deen, and it's mandatory knowledge. So anything, that's why it says like this, the mas'ala here, al-kharij min as-sabilayn. Anything that comes out from as-sabilayn. As-sabilayn, the 2 paths of impurities, the front and the back, basically. Anything that comes from it, whether it's pure or impure or whatever, just to make it as a rule. Al-khariju min as-sabilayn. Because there are different masail with this. If the normal thing that comes out from as-sabilayn is impure, urine, feces, things like that. This is impure, this is consensus, there's no differences of opinions about this. But what if someone inserted something as a medicine and it came out as it is? Just the fact that something comes out, and that's the mas'ala here. Anything that comes out from as-sabilayn, from the 2 paths, the front and the back, from the private parts, that breaks the wudu. Regardless if something comes out pure, as we said. Someone put medicine, he's in the hospital, they put medicine in there, came out immediately. Is that thing impure or not? This is a different mas'ala. We're talking here about what breaks the wudu. So anything that comes out from as-sabilayn breaks the wudu, even if it's might be pure in some instance. So al-khariju min as-sabilayn breaks the wudu. The second one, al-khariju min baqiyat al-badan, what comes out from the rest of the body. I think in the English translation, it's not mentioned as number 2, because they omitted it in the English translation. I don't have it here. But anyway, here it says al-khariju min baqiyat al-badan, what comes out from the rest of the body. And that takes us to the subject of what comes out from the rest of the body. Does it break the wudu or not? We know there are things comes out from the head, for example. Anything that comes from the head, it doesn't break the wudu. And the qay, except al-qay, which is throwing up, if it comes from the stomach, there's differences of opinions in the subject. And because of the authenticity or not of the hadith, but it doesn't break the wudu. But if someone wants to make wudu, sure. But other than that, it doesn't break the wudu. You know, things comes from the nose, saliva, and even if someone has cold or balgham or whatever there is the sweat, and the sweat, of course, is not something that is impure. But what they mean by sometimes al-kharij min baqiyat al-badan, if what normally comes from the private parts comes out from other than the private parts, does that break the wudu or not? Meaning urine comes out from a different part. A person in the hospital and they put some things on him, the urine is not coming from what it normally comes from, comes out in a bag, right? The same thing with the feces, comes out from his stomach, from his colon right away. So is it every time something comes out that breaks the wudu? Ulama, long time ago, they discussed this matter. So yes, it breaks the wudu. But someone like this, his wudu is being broken constantly. So he gets the ruling of what? We have the ruling also in fiqh. The one that man hadathuhu da'im. Remember the one that his hadath is continuous? Someone is constantly breaking his wudu. So what's the ruling of that person? make wudu at the time of the fard salah after it starts. It's not permissible for him to make wudu before the time of the salah. So we talked about that, remember? So if time for Asr, he cannot make wudu for Asr before the adhan of Al-Asr. He has to wait till the time of Asr starts, and then he makes wudu, and then he's busy with the salah, coming to the salah, making the salah, even if it's sunnah or tahiyyat al-masjid or something like this, and then fard the salah, that's fine. And anything that comes out, he doesn't have to make the wudu again, because his wudu is not broken in this case, because he has a continuity of not breaking the wudu, continuity of things coming out of impurity coming out from his body. So this is mainly what al-kharij min baqiyat al-badan, what comes out from the rest of the body, meaning the urine or the feces, if it comes out from a different place from as-sabilain, other than as-sabilain. The third one, زوال العقل بجنون أو إغماء أو سكر. زوال العقل, the losing one's conscious as a result of junoon, being insane, whether it's temporary or permanent, أو إغماء, or losing, fainting, or sukr, which is intoxication. Of course, if a person becomes insane and that's the state that he stays in, there's no responsibility, no wudu, no salah, nothing. He's not responsible for his actions. But what is meant here, if he lost his conscious temporary insanity, then he retained his conscious again, or he fainted, or intoxications. So as you see here, it's not discussing what's haram and what's halal. Intoxication is haram. Someone is intoxicated willingly, this is haram. But we're discussing here, does it break the wudu or not? So the rule is, yes, it breaks the wudu. And this is by these specific things, not sleeping. Sleeping is not mentioned here. So sleeping, also a person loses his conscience, but by sleeping. Sleeping, if it's deep sleep, yes, it breaks the wudu. If it's light sleep, and what's the difference between light sleep and deep sleep? Is if a person, people speak next to him or talk next to him, he can hear them. So basically, to take it as a rule, an-nawm, and what constitutes sleeping, regardless of heavy or light, sleeping breaks the wudu. And there's some differences here, but as a mas'ala, sleep and nawm. So if people have levels where they consider that sleeping or dozing or whatever, there is no talking about sleep. That means completely out. That breaks the wudu. Because if a person breaks the wudu, he won't be able to feel that. So, but this third one is about losing the conscious because of temporary insanity, or losing or fainting or intoxication. That's, of course, breaks the wudu. The fourth one, and again for the questions, inshallah, we're not talking about everything that is out there. We're just studying these specific masail, and there's many other things, but we're being very brief. But sometimes you get overpowered. You want to say things because people might have certain practicalities. But this is not the context of things. We're just studying what's in the book, and it's meant to be brief like this, so we don't want to make it more than what it is. Number 4, مس ذكر آدمي أو مس قبل من امرأة بدون حاجة. Touching, مس, the private part, whether it's a male or female touching one's private part, without حائل, بدون حائل, without anything in between, which is any حائل. حائل is basically the cloth or something, like, meaning if a person touches skin on skin, he touches his own private part, or for example a woman changing the diaper of someone or touching a private part of someone else, that by itself breaks the wudu. So مس ذكر آدمي أو مس قبل من امرأة بدون حائل. So the rule here, mess or touching the private parts in general, regardless what is the details of this, that breaks the wudu. And there's some details to it, but we're taking it at that stage, inshallah, because there's a hadith, and yes, there are many different evidences in there. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, من مس ذكره فليتوضأ, whoever touches his private part, then he should make wudu. And just to add with this, al-farj here, which is the private part of that is also الدبر, which is the back also, where the feces comes from. So both places, if it's touched, it breaks the wudu. Considering the back also is what farj means, which is the private part. So مس الذكر or مس, touching the private part without anything in between. Number 5, مس رجل امرأة بشهوة أو مس المرأة الرجل بشهوة. If a man touches a woman with desire or a woman touches a man with desire. Here, what constitutes the naqid here, or what breaks the wudu, is touching with a shahwa. That's it. Touching with a desire, that breaks the wudu. This is a mas'ala that has differences of opinions. And you might hear, for example, the contemporary scholars, which is based on also opinions of the madhahib and so on, that it's only breaks the wudu if something comes out. But if nothing, that doesn't break the wudu. But here, it says, according to that opinion, is if a man touches a woman, whether it's halal or haram, regardless. If it's with a desire, it breaks the wudu. Number 6, أكل لحم الإبل, to eat the meat of the camel, to eat camel meat. And the Jumhur is upon that does not break the wudu, but there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he was asked, we eat لحم الضأن نتوضأ منها والغنم, should we make wudu? He said, لا. And then when he was asked ﷺ, we eat the camel meat, هل نتوضأ, should we make wudu from it? He said, نعم, yes. So, and is it the meat only? Or also comes with that the spleen, the liver? You have a camel soup, right? Does that also falls under this? There's differences of opinion. So the mas'ala is like this. And some mentioned that anything that has to do with it breaks the wudu. And some said, no, it's only the lahm, only the meat. So to be on the safe side, anything that has to do with the camel meat, of course, it's permissible to eat, nothing wrong with that. But if you eat it, make wudu to be on the safe side. أكل لحم الإبل. Number 7, he says, كل ما أوجب غسلا أوجب وضوء. Anything that makes the ghusl obligatory, it makes the wudu obligatory. So anything that necessitates ghusl. Kal-Islam, for example. Al-Islam, if a person becomes a Muslim, he has to make ghusl. So the same thing, the wudu also becomes mandatory in that case. And of course, if he makes ghusl, that take care of it. And what they meant by this is one of the nawaqid of al-wudu, wal-'ayadhu billah, is al-ridda. If someone renegate away from the deen of al-Islam, that breaks his wudu. وانتقال مني, وانتقال مني ونحوهما. انتقال مني is a specific mas'ala, which is al-mani is the seminal fluid. If it comes out, of course, this is requires ghusl. Intiqal, does it makes the ghusl mandatory if it comes out or if it moves? If a person feels it, even if it doesn't come out. If a person feels it, feels that it's moved before it comes out, that breaks the wudu, and that also breaks the major tahara. That means a person has to make ghusl even if nothing comes out. So the mas'ala here is not about the actual coming out of the seminal fluid, it's the fact that it's moved from its place, and the person feels that even it didn't come out yet. And that instant breaks the tahara, makes the person has to take a shower, even if nothing comes out. Okay? So you understand the mas'ala like this? No. And he says, إلا الموت, except death, فإنه يوجب الغسل دون وضوء. Except death, then it's not enough for a person to make wudu, but they have to make ghusl, of course. But this is not wajib on the mayyit. The dead person is not obligatory upon him to wash himself because he's dead. It's wajib, it's mandatory upon those who are alive to wash the dead. And that's why in the translation, the word, Allahu A'lam, if the word releasing sperm is correct. It's not accurate. It's not. I guess maybe someone might understand from releasing comes out. No, it's not the actual coming out. It's the actual, I guess releasing is correct. from its place before even comes out. So these are the 7 nawaqid to al-wudu. Is it clear as far as the 7 points here without going into differences of opinions or anything else? تفضل. No. No. Now, if a person washes the private part of a baby, changing diapers and touching the private part of the baby, according to what we heard here, it breaks the wudu. Yes, the matter has differences of opinions because the hadith, it's general, so it's to be applied in anything. And it does not have to do with, when people talk about private parts, they have certain context of what the private part is mentioned for. So it doesn't have to be what the intention is, so any private part. So if it's touched, and that's to be in the safe side in this subject specifically, if it's touched without ha'il, without any paper or tissue or anything like this, then if the mother is changing the diapers of her child, then she needs to make wudu again to be on the safe side. طيب, afterwards is al-ghusl. Are we going fast? تفضل.
4 and 5, it's touching the private part.
Now, the difference between number 4 and number 5. Number 4, touching the private part. Number 5, touching the head, touching the arm. Any touching that is with desire. So the number 5 is more general, which is linked to the desire. Touching the private part without a desire still breaks the wudu. But a man touches his woman or vice versa, even if it's not, of course, the private part, if it's with a shahwa, with a desire, according to that specific opinion, that breaks the wudu. Right? But as far as the amal or what people are upon, especially with, which is an opinion of Riwayat Muhammad and others, it only breaks the wudu if something comes out. It comes out, which is the madhi and the wadi. We didn't talk about the kharij min as-saryan with details, which we should actually. Because what comes out of the private parts, we said it all breaks the wudu, even if it's pure. But what comes out, which is impure, we know that the urine is impure, and the feces, of course. And al-madhi is this transparent fluid that comes out as a result of a desire. That breaks the wudu, and it's najis, it's impure. And that will be mentioned in the impurities, inshallah. Al-wadi is a drop or so that comes to some people, not everyone, after urinating or after carrying heavy things or because of a disease or something, and it's also impure, and that breaks the wudu, and it's also impure. Al-mani, where human beings are created from, seminal fluid, this is pure, but it breaks the tahara, of course, and a person has to take ghusl or to make wudu, which is, when they say it breaks the wudu, wudu is not sufficient, of course. The person has to take a shower. But what breaks the ghusl by default breaks the wudu. So that from perspective of what broke the wudu, doesn't mean when they say it broke the wudu that you can only make wudu. Right? We have to understand also this point. So what breaks the wudu is not necessarily sufficient for you to make wudu only. So what breaks the major tahara, it breaks the wudu, but you have to make ghusl and not wudu. Right? So that's why the subject of it has to be only impure, that's not correct, because al-mani, seminal fluid, is pure. It's not itself, as physically, it's not najas, but it breaks the tahara of the person. Zawal al-aql, the losing of one's conscience. Oh, the najasat, al-wadi. Al-wadi comes after urinating, not to everyone. To some people, or someone has a illness or something like this. It's a thick drop or so, or something white or something like that. No. After ghusl is wudu is mandatory. The next subject is al-ghusl. The next chapter is al-ghusl. But making wudu after ghusl is not mandatory. If a person makes ghusl only, as far as what is sufficient, if he immerses his entire body in water with mouth and the nose, with the intention of ghusl, that means he's in state of ghusl. He's in state of tahara. The most perfect way is to make wudu, yes. طيب غسل إن شاء الله the next subject. Too many things in the test. ما شاء الله. How many شروط? How many conditions is that for wudu? 10 for wudu. 10 conditions. When we talked about the shurut, 10, right? And how many did we say for the furud, the obligations? 6, which is mentioned in the surah, in Surah Al-Ma'idah. And how many sunan? 9, mashallah. And how many makruhat, disliked matters? We talked about 4. And the nawaqid, the 7 nawaqid of al-wudu. Then now the al-ghusl. No. Questions, inshallah, we'll have hadith also. So, al-ghusl, inshallah. The ta'rif, the first thing is what defines al-ghusl. Al-ghusl, lughatan, istilah. Language-wise and religious-wise. Al-ghusl, بالضم الماء. When you say غسل, this is the water. وبالفتح الفعل. الغسل is the action, is the act of washing. And with al-kasr, غسل is the actual thing that cleans the water itself, right? So, or the not necessarily the water, the material that is used for cleaning, or the cleaning agent, as they say. But we're worried about the istilahan or religiously, what is the meaning of al-ghusl? He says, إفاضة الماء على جميع البدن من قمة الرأس إلى قرار القدم بالماء الطهور على وجه مخصوص والرجل والمرأة فيه سواء إلا أنه في حالة الغسل من الحيض أو النفاس ينبغي أن تزيل أثر الدم تماما بمطهر له رائحة نفاذة على رائحة الدم. So al-ghusl, the definition, and when always definitions, we learn in the definitions of al-fiqh that it doesn't talk about the entire subject, just give you the precise definition of it. If a person does it, he made ghusl, regardless of what's recommended is missed or something else. So al-ghusl, the definition of it, ifadatul ma. Ifadatul ma is to cover the body with water from the top of the head till the tip of the toes. The entire body is immersed in one, washed. And what constitutes washing? Al-ghusl is when the water runs on the body. It doesn't have to run on every single part of the body, as long as the person would use his hand to rub the places where the water is not running. So pouring the water and covering the body with water in a specific way, and that's why the mouth and the nose are included. And both men or women are the same, except, as he says, for hayd and nufas, talk about al-hayd and nufas, for menses or afterbirth bleeding, then it's mandatory for the women to remove the blood or the traces of the blood completely with something that has mutahhir or some form of a cleaning agent or something like this to remove the smell of the blood. So removing the najasa, of course, which is the case also if someone has najasa, has impurities on his body, if he wants to take a ghusl or a shower, then he has to remove that also for him or for her to be able to make salah. And damul hayd wal nufas is najis. It's impure, the blood of menses, as it will come, inshallah ta'ala. So al-ghusl is ifadatu al-ma'i ala jami' al-badan, to pour the water on top from the entire body, and including, of course, the mouth and the nose. Mujibat al-ghusl, as we talked about mujibat al-wudu, what makes the ghusl obligatory? 6 things. 6 things that would requires for the person becomes the ghusl mandatory for him. The first one, and we have to be, again, the words of the fiqh is very precise. خروج المني دفقا بلذة من رجل أو امرأة. خروج المني, المني is the seminal fluid. When it comes out, دفقا, to make sure that it's not as a result of a disease or extreme coldness or something like this, but دفقا, that means it comes with force, بلذة, with desire. This is what makes the ghusl mandatory, whether it's from a man or a woman. So that makes the ghusl mandatory, or it has to be done. As we said, just for it to move, that breaks the tahara. But when does the person has to make ghusl is when it comes out. So if a person, it moved and he went to make ghusl, and this is a mas'ala, right? Someone, the mani was released, but it didn't come out, and he went to make ghusl. And after he finished the ghusl, it came out. If it came out without a desire, that means just something was trapped or something like this. He doesn't have to make the ghusl again. He can only make wudu, right? So, but we're not into this yet. So, khuruj mani, that of course obligates the ghusl. تغيب حشفة أصلية في فرج أصلي. The having relations. Basically, which is, Arabic sounds, placing basically the organ into, from the organ of the man into the organ of the woman. And al-hashafa is the upper part of the man's organ. So once that upper part or the head disappears, then the ghusl is mandatory, even if there is no inzal, even if there is no ejaculation or so. That by itself constitutes the ghusl, the disappearing of the hashafa. And hashafa is where the circumcision for the men occurs. So not touching, but taghyib, disappearing. And this is refers to the relations. Number 3, إذا مات المسلم وجب تغسيله. If a Muslim dies, it's mandatory to wash him, to make ghusl to him. إلا شهيد المعركة في سبيل الله, except the martyr in the battlefield. Said شهيد المعركة, because the one that dies in drowning, he's shaheed. The one that dies as a result of a building collapsing, he's shaheed. Al-Mabtun shaheed, the one that dies with a disease in his stomach or in his inside of his guts or so, this is shaheed. But not if a person dies like that, is to be washed, of course. The one that is not to be washed is the one that dies in the battlefield. Number 4, Islamu kafirin asliyan aw murtaddan. Islam kafir. A kafir becomes a Muslim. Whether he is asli means not original, but means he's never been a Muslim before and he became a Muslim. Then he has to make ghusl. Or a murtad. Wal'ayadu billah, someone irtad, became a murtad, and then he comes back, then he has to make ghusl. Al-hayd, menses for women, that makes the ghusl wajib. When does the ghusl or making ghusl becomes mandatory for the woman? When she has her menses, is once the blood of the menses starts. Even though she's not taking a shower then, she's waiting till she's purified and then she will take the ghusl, right? But it becomes obligatory when it comes out, the blood, meaning that after she is clean, she has to take the shower. And nufas, the same thing, the afterbirth bleeding, also min mujibat al-ghusl, makes the ghusl wajib, obligatory, but that's after also it's finished or terminated. And of course, with the nifas, which is the afterbirth bleeding, if it stops after a week, then she has to clean herself and take a shower and make salah. The issue is if it stays more than 60 days, for example, then in that case she has to then clean herself to the best of ability and make salah. So it's not by the time, it's by the end of the blood and purifying oneself from it. So these are the 6 things that necessitates or makes the ghusl wajib. Khuruj al-mani dafaqan biladha. You have to make sure that these specific conditions are mentioned as mentioned here in these conditions. And the second one, taghibu hashafatin asliyah, the intimate relationship and how it's specifically mentioned. And the death of a Muslim and the Islam of a kafir, whether he's murtad or asli, al-hayd and nufas, al-hayd menses and nufas after birth bleeding. These are the 6 things that makes the ghusl an obligation. Then after that, the subject is من الأغسال المستحبة في الإسلام. The ghusl that is mustahab in Islam, but we'll stop here because of the time, and we need to take the hadith of the day. So this is, and then after that, we'll if there is any questions, inshallah, we'll talk about questions. So the hadith is the hadith of today, inshallah. Can you remind me of the numbers of the hadith that we took? We took this week 62. We take 61. We took 61, and we took 62. Correct? طيب 63, inshallah. Hadith number 63. So we took 61, 62, and now 63. The hadith of Abi Tha'laba al-Khushani رضي الله عنه قال: قلت يا رسول الله إن بأرض قوم أهل كتاب أفنأكل في آنيتهم؟ فقال: لا تأكلوا فيها إلا ألا تجدوا غيرها فاغسلوها وكلوا فيها. متفق عليه. So repeat after me because we're supposed to memorize it, inshallah. You don't have to memorize the name of the Sahabi. If you do, mashallah, this is great. And if you only memorize what the Prophet ﷺ said, as long as there's a question, you need to know the question, of course. So you have to memorize the question and the answer. So عن أبي ثعلبة الخشني رضي الله عنه قال: قلت يا رسول الله إن بأرض قوم أهل كتاب إن بأرض قوم أهل كتاب إن بأرض قوم أهل كتاب أفنأكل في آنيتهم أفنأكل في آنيتهم فقال: لا تأكلوا فيها لا تأكلوا فيها إلا ألا تجدوا غيرها ألا تجدوا غيرها فاغسلوها وكلوا فيها وكلوا فيها. حديث متفق عليه. That means in Bukhari and Muslim. So one more time. عن أبي ثعلبة الخشني رضي الله عنه قال: قلت يا رسول الله إن بأرض قوم أهل كتاب أفنأكل في آنيتهم؟ فقال: لا تأكلوا فيها إلا ألا تجدوا غيرها فاغسلوها وكلوا فيها. متفق عليه. Here the hadith, Abu Tha'laba al-Khushani radiallahu anhu, he said, I said to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Rasulallah, O Messenger of Allah, inna bi ardi qawmin ahli kitab. We are bi ardi qawm. Ard is the land or earth or so, but here bi ardi qawmi ahli kitab, bi ardin بأرض قوم. I'm sorry, بأرض قوم. So it's مضاف. بأرض قوم أهل كتاب. In the land of people that are from Ahlul Kitab. And Ahlul Kitab, if it's mentioned like that, that refers to who? To the Jews and the Christians. We are living in a land where the people there are Jews or Christians. أفنأكل في آنيتهم? Should we eat in their aniyah? We talked about Babul Aniyah in the chapter of Al-Aniyah. Should we eat in their utensils? Should we eat in their utensils? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا تأكلوا فيها, do not eat in it, إلا ألا تجدوا غيرها, unless you don't find غيرها other than it. This is the only aniyah, this is the only utensils you have. Then فاغسلوها, then wash it, وكلوا فيها, and then eat in it. Then eat in it. And this hadith, as you see the apparent meaning of it, that it's not permissible unless you don't find anything else in it. And it means basically that it's impure. But there is, this hadith specifically, we mentioned it here, even though we should memorize it, inshallah ta'ala. But there's other adilla, other evidences where the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they made wudu from aniyat al-mushrikeen, from the utensils of the mushrikeen, and they were not even from the people of the book. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَطَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ. The food of the people of the book is halal for you if it's slaughtered and so on. And this is basically what is meant by this is the aniyah or the utensils that is cooked in it, what's haram, or what they drink in it haram. And the aniyah depends also on the type of utensils, as the ulama they mentioned. So if you have a utensil that they cook in it pork, for example, can you eat from this? And when these types of things are mentioned, as it says, فَغْسِلُوهَا, right? So unless you don't find anything but it, so wash it. So, and there's actually another narration, and that's the hadith. You memorize it anyway, inshallah ta'ala, even though we should take it easy with memorizing something simple without going into differences of opinions. But it shows again, maybe we can learn something from it, inshallah ta'ala. There's another narration to it in Sunan Abi Dawood where it gives more explanation. That's how fiqh is. And sometimes people, they take an opinion based on one narration and they don't look into the rest of the narrations and things like this. So there's other riwayah, other narration of the hadith that explains it more clearer, in which the question was that they وَهُمْ يَطْبُخُونَ فِي قُدُورِ الْخِنْزِيرِ, that they cook in the where they have pork in it. وَيَشْرَبُونَ فِي آنِيَتِهِمُ الْخَمْرِ, and they drink from their aniyah or their utensils khamr, wine and the like of this. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِلَّا أَلَّا تَجِدُوا غَيْرًا. So you don't eat in these types of things, especially that utensils, many of it were made from wood. Right? So the wood takes the thing where the smell is still there. It's difficult to clean it, right? And it's not something that in the past, for example, when someone eats, not every time a person eats from something, they have to wash it with water. Not every place have this luxury, for example, right? So you eat, it's not najas, it's not haram. If someone eats from a plate, you eat after that person. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Religiously. Yes, a person would clean it, sure, no problem. But this is a matter of fiqh, a matter of deen, right? So as the ulama, they say, if a person, practicality-wise, if the plate is clean, then the ruling is permissible for a person to eat, if you know that it's clean. But if you're in doubt or you're not sure if it's clean, then of course you don't eat from it. Clean from what? From what's haram. Not clean from, like if someone put rice in it, it's not, the human beings, they don't become impure. It's all the illah. The reason here is because of the food that is put in the plates, right? So if someone is eating rice and rice only, or vegetable only from a plate, and he's a disbeliever, can you eat even without washing the plate? He eats and you put more and you eat yourself? Absolutely yes. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not haram. The issue is if they put something haram in it, and this is what the rulings comes in place with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, if it's haram, the Prophet ﷺ would have not said even فَغْسِلُوهَا, would not say wash it and eat from it. So that means that if you don't wash it and you keep it the way it is, and with the other narration shows that if there's meat in it. So see here also, you memorize the hadith, but the fiqh of the hadith is different than the apparent meaning of it. Right? So we have to pay attention to these things, inshallah. And that's why it's good to memorize these types of hadith, inshallah ta'ala. Is it clear? The hadith is clear? The question, there's a question here. There might be some personal questions, but we usually keep that in the end because again, it's what the class is for, what the class is for, inshallah ta'ala. But anyway, we'll try to brief, inshallah. I have a problem in my stomach during Ramadan while fasting. I make wudu at home to go to the masjid. As soon as breaking the fast, I pass air. Do I need to make wudu again? If it's a normal thing for a person, breaks the wudu, of course you have to make wudu again. As we said, if a person has a condition, physical condition, and a Muslim doctor or a doctor would say that you have a condition that you're not able to control your passage of the wind, then in that case, you have to make wudu after the time starts. And in that case, if you break your fast and you still going to the masjid, is before you go to the masjid. then you make wudu before you go to the masjid, and then go straight to the masjid, and there's no harm if it's a sickness, not just a normal thing. Sometimes people, their stomach is sensitive or something, and it's not, they don't have a sickness, because salas al-rih, salas, that means no control of a person's breaking his wudu whatsoever. The rih, or the passing air or so, he has no control over it. No control. Not that it's frequent, that's different. So the issue of salas al-bawl and salas al-rih is very important to understand. A salas is a physical ailment that a doctor would prescribe for the person, means of cure and things like this. Does the woman's discharge breaks the wudu? Not the menses. This is a detailed subject, but if anything that comes out breaks the wudu, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's impure. So it can be pure, but it breaks the wudu, and even though there's some differences of opinions in it. Does removing clothes breaks wudu? No, it doesn't break the wudu for a person to remove his clothes. That's not one of the things that breaks the wudu. If mani comes out without shahwa and touching to woman or private parts, should we still have ghusl? If the mani comes out without shahwa, without desire, that means a person has a condition. Whether it's as they say, when extreme cold or sickness, that doesn't require ghusl. Because usually the mani comes, a person might forget, it might be during his sleep, he forgot that it was shahwa or not. This is different. That means he has to make ghusl. But when a person also have sickness or very rare conditions, so this is then the ghusl is not mandatory. What's the difference between madhi and wadi? Madhi and wadi, we'll talk about it later, inshallah ta'ala. Madhi with madhi comes as a result of a desire, and wadi comes after urination. Not to everyone. Wadi, not to everyone, that comes after urination. And both are impure, and both requires wudu. Not ghusl, wudu. Also, the natural discharge of females does not make ghusl or wudu necessary. Wudu only, but not ghusl. How can a woman differentiate between the different fluids that comes out and which ones obligate ghusl or wudu? We talked about that, and there will be, inshallah ta'ala, some more details, but also what comes with the menses versus what's not associated with the menses. So if it's after the menses, that also to be in the category of menses, if it's part of the menses. A person who becomes Muslim, does he need to do ghusl after taking shahada, or can he take ghusl before taking shahada with the niyyah to becoming Muslim? If a person becomes a Muslim, he should not wait for the shahada till he make ghusl. Right? So when someone, for example, walks into the masjid, he hear about Islam, he wants to be a Muslim, we don't tell him go make ghusl first and come back and say the shahada. There's no reports or evidences that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum did that, or even before that the Prophet ﷺ did that. So first thing is to take the shahada. What if he dies when he was taking a shower? So it's to take the shahada, and then we will tell him to go take ghusl, and because he has to make ghusl anyway to make the salah and the wudu and things like this. Any questions? If anyone from Ahl Kitab cooks food, can we eat from it? Yes. If mushrikeen cooks the food, can you eat from the food of the mushrikeen other than Ahl Kitab, meaning other than Jews and Christians? If the meat is slaughtered by a Muslim or slaughtered by a Jew or a Christian, and an atheist cooked the food, that's fine. But as long as the meat is slaughtered by a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian, and they say Bismillah, slaughtered by them, and they say Bismillah, and then anyone cooks the food, it's okay. No. Anything else? So, What do you mean? Oh, okay. The shak. Now, this also is going to be mentioned, inshallah ta'ala, the issue of a person is in doubt. Did he pass wind or not? Did he break his wudu or not? A shak, or being in doubt, does not break the wudu. unless, as the Prophet ﷺ said, unless a person hears a sound or smells something. So that means it took him from being in doubt to be certain. So to reach the state of certainty that a person broke his wudu, either he knows whether he hears or he doesn't, whether there's a smell or not, he broke his wudu, he knows that. Or he's in doubt. So if he doesn't hear anything and he doesn't smell anything, then he is in his original state, which is the wudu. Now, what if you are unsure you have wudu or not before the prayer and it's time to pray, better to make wudu? This is a mas'ala here, but to be very brief, you always go back to what you're certain in. So if you're in doubt that you made wudu or not, right? Just pay attention to this and that's easy, inshallah. If you're in doubt whether you made wudu or not, what's your certain of? That you're not in wudu. You were in state of not being in wudu, but then you're in doubt whether you made wudu or not. That means you don't have wudu when you make wudu. But now you're certain that you made wudu. You remember very well, you made wudu. But you're in doubt whether you broke your wudu or not. You see the difference? That means what are you certain of? That you made wudu. So you are in wudu. Unless this doubt becomes certain. You see, there's major difference between both here. We have one last one because of the salah. Then if there's any more questions, we'll do it later, inshallah. Does the arousal fluid requires ghusl, which is the madhi? The madhi does not require ghusl, it requires wudu only. The madhi, as a result of the desire, does not require ghusl, only desire requires wudu, and it's impure, that means it has to be washed. Wallahu a'lam. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا بحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.